Greetings, everyone. So we kind of tried to build an application similar to Indeed, which is a job listing website. So I'll just give you a brief regarding what technologies have been used for this app, which we created. Um, I'll just so for we have used a variety of technologies over here for learning purpose as well. So for database, we used MongoDB and MySQL. And for in-memory data structure storage, Redis was used. Message queues, they were set up for multiple requests here using Zookeeper and Kafka. And server, it was powered by AWS to ensure scaling and updates and rollouts. We use Node with Express for backend APIs, and React with Redux state management was used for frontend. And for performance testing, we used JMeter, and we tested the application for about 100 to 500 concurrent users.
Okay, so now we'll look over the system design architecture that we'll be following to develop the Indeed application. In the front end, we will prefer React along with the Redux. So the main reason to prefer React here is because the advantage which React provides, that is the virtual DOM, and this is the only framework which only renders the node whenever there is any updation, instead of re-rendering the whole DOM tree. So because of that advantage, we are preferring React. Now here we are also opting Redux along with React. This is because Redux provides a single state of management object where we can use that object, the state, which can be shared across all the siblings of the UI components in the React. So for the data management, we are using Redux, and then these two we are going to integrate in the front end. So whenever a user hits any API call, so that will be we will redirect that API call to the load balancer application. So load balancer, it will distribute the load across the backend services. So in the backend, we are going to use Node along with the Express server, and we are also going to use the Kafka as a messaging queue. And along with Kafka, we have a Zookeeper. So this is all there in the backend. And then so whenever a request comes, it goes to the load balancer, and then load balancer will distribute to the backend. So what will happen here is like Kafka being as a middleware, as a messaging queue. Whenever there are any messages or any request, so Zookeeper along with Kafka will redirect to the appropriate nodes. And here our producers are the databases, and the consumers are the UI client requests. So in this structure, we are going to integrate the Kafka. Then Kafka backend is also connected with the databases. So here, as mentioned earlier, we are going to opt for the two databases. One is MongoDB and the MySQL. So based on their benefits, we are going to isolate the data which will go in which databases. So also we have a Redis used here for caching. So Redis is used like whenever any API is hit, and whenever data is being fetched from the database. So instead of fetching the data repeatedly, we are going to cache that data in the Redis. So next time if a customer or client hits the same API, it will go to the Redis, it will search in the Redis, and then it will return the data from the Redis itself instead of going to the database. So this will minimize the time required to fetch the data. And so that is why we are using Redis as well here. Then the other thing here is like MySQL and MongoDB. These two are in collaboration with Kafka's Zookeeper. And then also we might opt for the GraphQLs. This is kept for the future enhancement, because nowadays, like instead of using like it, there can be under data or over data required on the UI. So in such scenario, we need to create new endpoints, and this will increase the API endpoints. So to avoid that, we might use GraphQLs. It's just a it's just a query language, and we will get whatever the data is required on the front end. Only that data can be fetched within a single API instead of making multiple API calls. So we can make use of GraphQL as well, which can be benefited in the rendering speed, in the getting the data on the UI. So that speed will be increased, and we can minimize the lagging speed on the UI. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so coming to the database schema, so primary database is MongoDB with NoSQL. Actually, it is combination of MySQL and NoSQL database. So for uh, authentication purpose, we are using MySQL, and for storing rest of the data, we are using MongoDB. Having said that, there are subtle differences between MongoDB and MySQL. I'll walk you through a couple of them. So basically, MongoDB represents data uh, as of JSON documents, whereas MySQL represents data in tables and rows. So in MongoDB, you do not need to define any schema, while in MySQL, you need to define your tables and columns, and you can easily use join operations with MySQL, while MongoDB doesn't support that. So in and all, when you need high volume storage of data, we generally tend to go with MongoDB because it supports unstructured data, and it is useful when your data will scale at a rapid pace. Um, Having said that, we have some performance differences between MongoDB and NoSQL database, which will be shown in the upcoming slides. So this is like the ER diagram of MongoDB. So at a high level, we have lots of tables like messages, application jobs, employer, company, service jobs, salary review, etc., which are totally maintained in MongoDB, and we also have couple of tables which are maintained in MySQL database. Yeah. So basically, uh, user and application related information. So which applications were submitted, and which jobs were saved. So that kind of information is maintained in MySQL database.
Okay, one more point which I would like to add is like if you want, like these are the data where we require ACID properties like atomicity, consistency, then isolation and durability. So such parameter properties we are required. So we have added those data in this MySQL, those tables in this MySQL database. And yeah,
So yes, we just followed our application and we got to know that there was one API which was used most by the user, and that was to get reviews of the different companies. So for that reason, we tested that API with with different number of concurrent users from 100 to 500 for different combinations. So first of all, we tested using only the base, that is the database only. There was no additional things which were attached at the backend. So in that we can see the response time for every user starting from 100 to 500. It is very high. If we see the blue line, if we see the blue line, this is this is for 100 users, and at the x-axis there are different combinations of B. B stands for base, D stands for database pooling, S stands for SQL caching using Redis, and K stands for Kafka. And on the y-axis we have plot using the response time in milliseconds. So using only base, we can see that the response time for 100 concurrent users was almost around 2000 milliseconds. Um, and which rises which increments with the rise in the users. So at last, for the 500 users, it rose to around 8500 milliseconds. Then we added database pooling for the same amount of users, and we can see that there was a drastic drop in there was a drastic drop in the response time, in the response time, which leads with which we can infer that using the database pooling, we can reduce the response time and increase the throughput of a particular system. So after this, we attached SQL caching using Redis, and the results which we came across is it was immediate. It was a drastic drop in the response time for all the users. So because of so basically what SQL caching using Redis does is, if before if there is if that API is already hit, uh, then we save that particular response of save the response of that particular API in cache, and whenever the next time it hits again, we take the response from that API or that cache part only. So using this logic, we can say that the response time of using the SQL caching drops drastically. At last, we added Kafka along with the SQL caching. So so there was not much change in that. The response time between the SQL caching and caching is almost same, and we can compare through our eyes also. So there was no difference between them. Lastly, we added a load balancer. Next slide. So for the so our so since our application was deployed on EC2 instance, on AWS EC2 instance, so we had to as our the system is a distributed system, so we need, as our application is distributed, so we need to check the scalability, and we need to maintain the load of each of our application. So we tested this our application on a number of servers. So the reason for using multiple servers is like, suppose if one server goes down, we will have other server which is we should have other server which is running, and the load will automatically get balanced between the other servers if any one system goes down. So what we did is we tested our system based on total of 4 servers starting from 1, 3, and 4. So initially we did some load balancing for the load balancing, and with respect to that, we can see that the for response time for 100 users, uh, So the blue bar graph represents it has one server. The red one represents we introduce three instance, and the yellow ones says that it has four servers or four instance in load balancer. So for 100 number of concurrent users, we can see that the response time is quite high, which gets dropped as we attach number of users. So this is the basic logic behind it. And going towards the 500 concurrent users, we can see that there is a drastic drop between the number of server 1 and number of servers is 3. So we can say that load balancing manages the number of servers with respect to which load is coming and how to manage the load between the servers. So basically what logic is used is, suppose if n number of requests come on the server one, the load balancer decides using the round robin algorithm that, and in which of the present servers or active servers it has the least load. So on the basis of that, it divides the load, or it divides incoming request on the number of servers. So using this logic, we can see that by attaching multiple servers, we can maintain our throughput of the application at very high rate, and response time at very low rate. Mm, Also,
Okay.
so yes, this was a performance graph for the most used API.
This was quite informative, Chintan. But what I didn't understand was what was the benefit of using Kafka in here?
So suppose if we have this was for only 500 concurrent users.
Yeah.
Suppose we are in actual scenario, we may have more than 500, more than 1,000 scenarios.
Yeah.
So the Kafka does what is it is a messaging queue.
Yeah.
For example, if we consider that there is a connection break between our backend and the database.
Yeah.
So what Kafka does is it stores the data, and as soon as the connection between the database and backend it's again up. So the Kafka sends the message to the backend that these were the messages which were there before the connection got down. So it sends the connection, it sends the messages, or sends the response in the message queue format. So with the help of that, uh, that is the main use of our Kafka.
Okay. Nice. Yeah.
And I had one doubt regarding can we go back to that architecture slide? I think it was the second or third
Okay.
slide.
Yeah.
Here, why are we specifically using Redux?
Okay. Redux.
Yeah.
Okay. So main purpose here is like, suppose there are, we want to share the data among the sibling components in the React. So that time it becomes very difficult to store all the data in a parent component in the state. So to avoid that, we are going to prefer Redux here. We could have done this using React Context API, which they have recently introduced in, I guess, 16.8 React version. But that is like that we can prefer only if our application size is within the limit. If it goes beyond certain limit, at that time we need to opt for the Redux only, and it's a single source of truth. And there are various benefits, like if there are some action creators, then we can dispatch any action. So based on the action, we can update the store. So once we update the store, we again, because of map state to props and all those things,
Yeah.
the UI components get re-rendered. So in this manner, we can achieve like better performance as well in terms of performance. So that is why we are preferring Redux here, and we are also preferring Thunk as a middleware in between React and Redux, which is not shown here in the diagram. This is
Okay.
because whatever the actions we are dispatching from the UI, from the React, those are
Mhm.
asynchronous actions. sorry, those are synchronous actions, and we want to, if we want to add any validations in between those synchronous actions, we will be using thunk to make it asynchronous. And
Okay.
as JavaScript is a single-threaded language, it becomes very necessary to have this thunk as a middleware to handle the
Okay.
synchronous calls. So that is why we are using Redux in accordance with React.
Okay. Thank you.
One last question, coming back to Kafka. So, in this entire architecture, where exactly does Kafka fit in? Is it used for interfacing between the front end and your backend, or it is for the backend to communicate within themselves?
The Kafka, we put a Kafka between, it is the middleware between the backend and the database. It acts as a middleman, like suppose if backend is sending some request to the database that I want so and so information from so and so table. So Kafka acts as a middleman. It accepts the request, it sends to database, and in the message form, it returns back to the backend.
Oh, okay, right. So this would be basically so what you are essentially telling is backend would post an event on a Kafka topic, and then the database which is basically NoSQL would consume that Kafka topic, or it can even MySQL database consume those topics.
Yes, we can use in any of them. Like we can use in SQL or MySQL or Mongo, any of them.
Oh, okay, right, got it. Yes.
So any other questions, or we are done with it?
We are good.
Okay. So yeah, that's all from our side. Thank
Thank
you.
you.